The subject of this video series will be the question of the nature of reality. Not merely subjective reality, your reality or my reality, but the nature of reality as such. What is this world? What is this life we are living? And a British author, he named one of his books Life, the Universe and Everything. And that's quite a bit, but it's not entirely inappropriate for the subject of this video series. And this question, the nature of reality, that's not merely an academic or a theoretical question. It has great significance for the actual life we live. So it's quite interesting. So the three main questions that would be addressed. The question of whether we have a free will or our actions are predetermined. That's pretty important, both with regards to personal responsibility, but it also has some interesting ethical implications, and it's even related to a happy life, it seems. Then there's the question of life after death. Usually this question is associated with religious belief, but the perspective here in this video series will not be religious. It will be philosophical and scientific, and even at this approach, it's the question is much more open than is usually assumed. And then finally, the question of the meaning of life, no less, will be that will be the third subject. So these are some pretty big questions, and the parts in this series will be fairly short. So obviously the questions can't be treated in detail, but I'll attempt to present some of the main insights, you might say, or some of the main points. A brief introduction. My name is Nikolaj Pilgaard Petersen. I do philosophy both at an academic level, doctoral level, but also I try to present the philosophical thoughts in a more accessible way. I've written a few books and doing videos like this, so a broader audience might find it useful. Also, I've been teaching philosophy, of course, but also history and mathematics for quite a number of years. Okay, so what is it all? That's a metaphysical question. Metaphysics is the part of philosophy that deals with the question of the most fundamental structures of reality. And the most widespread conception in the Western world, at least today, is the idea of metaphysical materialism. That is the idea that the only thing that exists independently is the physical matter. So specifically, consciousness can't exist without the physical, without a brain. And usually the idea is that our consciousness is somehow a product of processes in the brain. Well, it's this metaphysical position of materialism is widespread, and that's not without reason. The natural sciences were hugely successful in the 17th, 18th centuries, but accelerating in the 19th and 20th centuries. They were hugely successful in explaining how the physical world works. So no longer religious or mythological explanations, but now scientific explanations in great detail. So for historical reasons and due to its explanatory power, the idea of materialism closely connected to the natural sciences has become very widespread. And there's usually a notion that other views of reality are somewhat naive, or well, now we have reached the kind of the knowledge of how the world is. However, there are a number of problems with this position. It's not a scientific finding itself. So the natural sciences, they look at how the natural world works, they look at the physical world. So when we treat metaphysical questions, it's not a question of only the physical, but it's a question of reality as a whole. So empirically, only the physical is accessible. So the natural sciences, they are unable to prove, you might say, or to say anything final about whether or not there are non-physical aspects of reality. So it's not a scientific finding that materialism is true. It's a presumption or a hypothesis. So philosophically, there's some problems, but the biggest one is the problem of consciousness. In the philosophy of mind, that's the all-encompassing problem. So how does consciousness arise from the brain? The consciousness is something non-physical. Thoughts and ideas and will, that's not physical. It can't be measured. It's not empirically accessible. So how does physical processes generate something non-physical? And there are no good theories for this. So this has even been called an utter failure of materialism. So this is a big problem, and during the last years, last decade or so, other avenues have been explored to a greater degree than has otherwise been the case during the 20th century. So the problem of consciousness is a huge philosophical problem. There are what you might call secondary problems as well. The problem of free will, for example. If our thoughts and will are a product of neural processes, of processing of the brain, and what happens in the brain are determined by the natural laws, in effect at least, then it means that all our thoughts and what we will are determined by those laws as well. So we don't have a free will. Our actions are predetermined, not by some God, but by the causal mechanisms of the physical, by the natural laws. And let's not logically impossible, but most people, they they don't really like the idea that they couldn't have done anything else than they did. So that we don't have a free will in a traditional sense. So usually usually this is seen as a problem for materialism. Another problem is how to ground ethics objectively. Usually we see some actions as good and some actions as bad. Some actions are ethically better than others. It's better to be kind and helpful and nice than it is to just randomly slaughter people for no reason, for example. But if one takes well, in a materialistic context, it's very hard to justify that some actions should be better than others ethically. The natural laws, well, they are just as they are, and if everything is determined by the natural laws, then nothing is ethically better than anything else. So so usually we end up in ethical relativism, cultural relativism. Well, some cultures, they have some ethical norms, and other cultures have other, but none are objectively better than anyone than any other. So we have this intuition that of ethics, but it's hard to ground it if one has a materialistic point of view. So there are some good reasons for trying to look at alternatives to the materialistic metaphysical viewpoint, and there are other positions that has seen more attention, as I mentioned, during the last years. So there's good reason to actually treat the question, take the question seriously of what is it all? If materialism, metaphysical materialism, is not actually true, as it is otherwise often, well, just presumed to be, then it opens up for us some entirely new perspectives on some of the questions I mentioned. For example, the question of life after death, or on free will, or even on the meaning of life. And then it's suddenly a very existentially relevant question, at least if one wants to live an intellectually or existentially reflected life, so to speak. So in the next part of this series, the subject of the free will be treated. Thank you.